All right, everybody, welcome into DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Today, good to have all of you with us on Facebook, on YouTube. We'll take a lot of your comments, and we'll have a good time today. And if you missed yesterday, Christy, by the way, thanks for checking in on YouTube. Good to see you. If you missed yesterday's version of our podcast, for those of you who are kind of joining us for the first time, you're normally used to seeing me in the studio. The show is pretty much the same thing for the video as is for the podcast. It's obviously a little different right now because of what we're going through. We are kind of at home, social distancing right now. So we're trying to do our part to, I guess, set a good example on that. And while we're doing that, we're doing the show a little bit different kind of way. But DawgNation Daily, pretty much as you expected, is available as a podcast. Yesterday, I thought we had a really good conversation. We talked a little bit about how Kirby Smart is viewed as a recruiter, as an on-field coach. Kind of went back through the past a little bit and kind of addressed some of the things that Smart himself has kind of said about that over the years. And I thought it turned out pretty well. We had a great interview with Jeff Sintel. Today's podcast is going to have another interview with Jeff Sintel. So for those of you that like as much Jeff as you can get, Jeff back again on DawgNation Daily today. I had a little technical difficulty trying to get Mike Griffith on the phone. So Jeff was good enough to stand in for Mike, and we'll hopefully get Mike here coming up really soon. So it's kind of an odd time, weird time. We're making the best out of it. And I know I'm asking a lot of time from you to watch our video now and then listen to the podcast later on. But if you can do that, I think we've had a pretty good run of things here thus far. So I hope you'll be able to check that out. Stephen England checking in to say good morning. Appreciate that. Joe Tony checking in, BA's daddy checking in. Donor 1953 says he's in good health right now. That's good to be able to see. Hope all of you stay that way, and hope we're able to just kind of take a lot of fun comments and just generally provide a good college football conversation. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Hopefully the view is pretty good today. I've kind of got the cameras set up a little different, so I'm not having to turn quite as much back and forth as I maybe did yesterday. This will be a little bit of a work in progress for the next couple of days, but we'll try to have it all figured out and try to deliver something good for you. Light Dog 1968 says it's definitely a weird time. The grocery store is like a Mad Max movie. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that thus far, hopefully we're all healthy. The one thing we've all been kind of impacted by is just inability to sometimes shop and buy all the things you want to buy and do that kind of stuff. The good news is, and I continue to see a lot of news reports on this, and we'll talk more about this later on our show too, as it references our friends at Kroger, but the supply chain is going to remain open, right? Trucks are still delivering. Companies are still making the goods. The shortage, it seems like we see, is not in relationship to an actual shortage of goods, food, toilet paper, things like that. It's just in relationship to the companies able to get it on the shelves quick enough and have people not kind of go into a panic buy and kind of hoard it all. So I think deep down we kind of all understand that. And we'll try to keep our mind on other things here for a moment. Jim Needham says, checking in from Rhode Island. Appreciate you still providing a healthy distraction. Well, Jim, I appreciate that as well. Thank you for being here. And that's our goal. Ultimately, we try not to take really anything too seriously. We try to, we know what our place in life is, right? In terms of solving the most substantial issues facing our society. That's not really my job. And I don't know that many of you view that to be your job either. We just want to enjoy our lives, enjoy our family, enjoy our friends, celebrate living in a great country like this. And while some of that kind of stuff is upended, what can we do to make things a little bit better? Ultimately, that's kind of the thing we're trying to do here right now. Gerald Herman says, turn the lights on. It's not that kind of show. Yeah, it does seem a little darker than yesterday for whatever reason. I think I've got the light in a different place. So we'll keep doing some stuff. Mark Brown says, I'm out here delivering now. Mark, appreciate you staying busy and helping everybody get stuff on the shelf. We appreciate that. Donor 1953 says, as Larry Munson said many times, let's hunker it down one more time. Yeah, that's a good way to kind of think about that for sure. Philip Jordan Wells also saying he's surprised to see the show starting on time. Yeah, listen, we've actually done a little better with the on-time stuff as of late. Chris Brandon says, day 6, food still in good supply. Carson Beck's growing stronger by the day. It's funny to see some of the photos of Beck, and he's been sharing some of this kind of stuff on Instagram, other places. He has really gotten himself an amazing physical condition. I mean, it's really pretty amazing. elite athletes, guys who are good enough to get a scholarship at a place like Georgia, they're just seemingly really good at transforming their bodies. And it's one of the reasons why there's no better commercial for, if you can be an early enrollee, you should. If you can do that, you should. There's no better commercial for that than a guy like Beck. You see some of the photos that he shared, and the Chris Milton has kind of said some of this kind of stuff about Kendall Milton as well. It's just a really cool chance to get bigger, get stronger, get in better shape. And I think a lot of these guys, once they get into a weight program like what they were able to experience before Georgia shut down, and once they get into that nutrition program, I think the players themselves are probably legitimately fascinated at just how rapidly their body can really change. Some of us who are in our 40s, if we want to go on a big body transformation, our metabolism burns a little slower. Our physiology is probably just not the same. And so it takes a little longer. For these younger guys, primes of their life, a little easier to go through that transformation. And I talked to Jeff Sentell about this a moment ago, and it's going to be a part of DawgNation Daily, the podcast, which we'll do later on today. You can hear that. I'll make sure that I try to put a lot of links out there for that so you can find the podcast. If you're only a video listener, usually you'll get a chance to listen to DawgNation Daily, the podcast. And what Jeff and I talked about, and I shared some of this with y'all a little bit yesterday, is that is that ultimately how you handle that time away from the resources of Georgia is going to be really important, right? How you handle the lack of hand-delivered nutrition, the way that Georgia provides that. How you deal with the lack of access to Scott Sinclair. Sinclair, hands-on, providing the kind of accountability that allows you to, have a great experience in the weight room. A lot of guys are going to be on their own for that now. And we've already seen, some guys are still able to connect with personal coaches, but we're also in a situation, and a lot of you experience this personally, where gyms are closing. You can't even get into a gym anymore for right now. So how do you find a way to do that? Is it Rocky Balboa in Russia getting ready for Ivan Drago? Are you out there dragging a plow? Are you climbing a mountain? What are you doing? I mean, after all, many of you remember that was one of the things that Jerry Rice made famous. Rice would run the hill every day. There are low-tech ways, I guess, to have a really good workout. And who's able to figure out those things? Who's able to do that? Well, that's going to end up being a pretty interesting thing. Dallas Schwartz checking in from Asagi, NorCal. Dallas, we appreciate you being here. Tony Tillman says, do you think we will have college football this year? So, Tony, here's my answer on that. Obviously, I don't know. It certainly seems, on the basis of G-Day being canceled yesterday and things like that, it certainly seems we're going to be living with this a little longer than any of us want to. And I almost don't want to dwell on that too much, because the act of social distancing and the act of doing our part to help keep our neighbors healthier is made more difficult when we think about this being something that we're forced to live with for an indefinite period of time. And the reason why we're doing the show from home right now is we just kind of thought it was important to try to set a good example of what social distancing would look like. But admittedly, and I'm just going to speak honestly here, when I thought I was doing this for 2 weeks, the notion of doing this from home didn't seem like a big deal. But talking into twin laptops here, if it were to go on for months and months and months, is going to get pretty hard. I mean, I just hate to say it that way, but it's going to. And I think it's going to get hard for all of it. So what does the season look like? Practice supposed to start in late July, typically. Season's supposed to kick off at the end of August, beginning of September. I can't even go there right now on the possibility that things won't be better in time for that. I can't tell you they will be better, but it's not helpful for me to think about the alternative on that for the moment. It's just not. The best I can tell, on the basis of what people are saying, the more we do now to take care of ourselves, the better things will get quicker sooner. If that makes sense. Ken Veal says, trying to set the mood. Yeah, my light's in a little bit of a weird position today. I'll see if I can get that fixed, but hopefully we're on kind of a relaxed vibe. Maybe I need to go to a brighter room. BTW, I hope not. I hope that's not true. Adam Hicks says, with a new offensive coordinator, new quarterback, and high turnover at offensive line, do you think Georgia's hurt more by missing spring practice and other SEC programs? Adam, I think that's a good question. And I think that there will be some programs more impacted by this than others. And I don't know that the answer to, well, who is who in that regard, I don't know that that's necessarily easy to determine. As you said, well, it seems like Georgia's got a lot of new, and so therefore it's more likely they're impacted by all of this. But the truth is, when it comes to installing an offense, when it comes to getting a quarterback up to speed, I actually believe you can probably do that a little quicker than you might think, especially with the kind of resources that Georgia can have to throw at a problem like that. This is an example of why Georgia probably wanted an experienced quarterback. Not that it had any idea that a coronavirus was coming, but experience is a good thing to have. So the fact that you're leaning on a guy in Newman who's played before ends up being a good thing. I think the real issue is, and I kind of touched on this a moment ago, the real issue is for the individual players, what kind of shape do they find themselves in? What kind of body condition do they find themselves in? That's going to end up being the real thing through all of this, the thing that determines, who has a successful year or not. It's not going to be determined program by program by program as much as it's going to be determined by individual player. Certain guys are just going to handle it better than others. They're going to find a way to keep themselves in shape. And John Stinchcomb, when he joined us on Monday, was pretty clear about this. It's not just guys not getting too fat, right? And if I was a college football player, that'd be my issue. Can I keep from ballooning up? Already at home over the last couple of days, I'm eating things I wouldn't normally eat. I'm, having a sip of drink that I wouldn't normally have. I'm, doing things to kind of pacify my anxiety over the uncertainty that we're out there. I'm consuming calories that I wouldn't normally consume. So if I was a football player, you'd be worried about me ballooning up. But there are many of you, and John Stinchcomb said he was a guy like this, that just maintaining that appropriate weight for an offensive tackle, being big enough, is a hard thing to do. It takes a lot of protein, and a lot of you who know folks who try to weight gain have done everything from putting butter in their coffee to waking up in the middle of the night to eat a meal at 3:30 in the morning, just try to get enough calories to be as big as they need to be. So that's what this is ultimately going to come down to. To me, it's not how quickly can you install a new offense. I think one way or another, you can probably do enough to get by with that. It kind of comes down to more of, are your players in the kind of physical condition to make it through the rigors of a season? That's what's going to be hard for a lot of programs, not just Georgia. And this won't be felt by an individual program. It's going to be felt by individual players across the program. At least that's my best guess. Let's do a couple more here. BJY says, I weigh 190 right now. I can be at 210, solid muscle before April starts. D1 genetics. Well, BJ, that's good to be able to hear. Derek Tillman, that's a very funny line. I appreciate you keeping it light and not happy right now. Appreciate that on Facebook over there. John Benton says, this is actually an interesting point. John says, if they end up extending summer camp, and what John's assuming for a moment is on the basis of not having a spring practice, does the NCAA then make way for a longer summer camp to account for the 20 practices that got missed during the spring? Could something like that happen? And I guess the answer is there's a possibility that could indeed take place. And if it does, for the guys who weren't going to be able to go through spring practice, and a lot of these are receivers, 4 of the 5 incoming receivers would not have been through spring practice, it will be an opportunity for them to get up to speed quicker. Now, the question becomes, when do those guys actually get a chance to show up on campus? Typically, we think of late May, early June, that being the case. I think it stands to reason there's a very good chance that doesn't happen. Those folks that would graduate high school at the end of May and then show up on campus right after that, I think that timeline for now is very much up in the air. Chili Vic says, how does this cancellation affect Newman and Brennan? Well, these guys are going to have to find a way to get some throws in somewhere and try to find a way to get some throws in with the receiver if they can. What are the latest recommendations from the CDC? Limit yourself to less than 10 people at a time. And I guess if you're throwing longer routes, you can keep that social distance between yourself and receiver and wipe down that ball good, washing your hands good. I guess some of that is still okay to be done. But for a lot of these quarterbacks, and it's weird in the SEC, Chili's an LSU fan, so he mentioned Brennan. We'll think of Newman because he's freshly arrived, but Alabama's going to have either a totally inexperienced quarterback or a mostly inexperienced quarterback. LSU's going to be breaking in a new guy. There's a lot of inexperience at quarterback across the SEC. We don't know about Tennessee's situation for the moment. So there's a lot of that going on. And finding a way to get some throws, finding a way to get familiar with an offense, because what they can do is you can have the playbook, you can go through it, you can, I think, be on the phone with them. I guess regular contact periods are going to still apply here in terms of contact with coaches and things like that, but you're going to be able to do some things to bring yourself cognitively up to speed, physically up to speed. So a lot of these quarterbacks going to have that extra responsibility to do a good bit of this on their own. Lou Dog says, I don't care how good Bryce Young is, he isn't ready for this defense. And obviously that's the hope. Bryce Young is the 5-star quarterback at Alabama. A competition between he and Mac Jones to decide who the starting quarterback for the Crimson Tide is going to be. And a lot of ways what's going to happen in Alabama almost reminds you of what went down there in 2015. In 2015, Jake Coker eventually became the starting quarterback for Alabama. He was not a freshman, but he was a first-time starter. But when Alabama lost in September of 2015 to Ole Miss, Coker didn't start that game. Cooper Bateman started that game, and then Coker came in and then had the job the rest of the season, and Alabama went on to win the national championship. So for a lot of Georgia fans, you think, well, is it going to be a similar thing here where Alabama is still unsettled with its starting quarterback going into that game against Alabama, trusting the guy who's played some, Mac Jones, where eventually a lot of folks think that Bryce Young may eventually win that job. And there's obviously a chance that's exactly what it plays out. Prior to Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts, that had kind of been Saban's process a little bit, taking these quarterback competitions into the season. He had done a little of that. And so maybe in the post-Tua Tagovailoa era, there's a chance that he does that again, something along those lines. So, I can't wait to be talking about that game for real. I can't wait to actually be seeing that play out, because obviously Kirby Smart, and I addressed this on yesterday's podcast edition of DawgNation Daily. Kirby Smart, I do think, is a defensive mastermind. We give credit to these offensive masterminds so much, of the guys that are diabolical, mad scientists of play calling. And for whatever reason, all of us in the media, and I think to a general degree fans as well, are guilty of lionizing the offensive-minded head coaches at the expense of not sometimes giving enough credit to the defensive-minded coaches. But you want to see how good of a coach Kirby Smart really is? Think of it a game like that with Alabama. Either a quarterback in Mac Jones who hasn't played a ton, or a guy in Bryce Young who really, as of now, hasn't played at all. We'll see how much he plays in the first couple of weeks of the Crimson Tide. Coming up with a game plan to befuddle that quarterback. Coming up with a game plan, even in a hostile environment on the road, that can cause problems for Alabama's offense. Boy, it'd be great to see. And obviously, Alabama's got a monkey wrench they can throw back towards Georgia of, well, we've seen a very pass-happy version of the Crimson Tide the last few years. A lot of that on the basis of not just Tua Tagovailoa. I've said before, the quality of the Alabama receivers that at one point in time included Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy, they're about to be gone. But the quality of those receivers was so good that I think it made Tua Tagovailoa's job a lot better. But with no Tua, with no Jeudy, with no Ruggs, with Najee Harris coming back, is this an Alabama offense now that leans a little bit more on the running game, especially as a way of protecting either a relatively inexperienced or totally inexperienced quarterback? I think that's worth watching. But I agree with the original commenter who said that Kirby dialing up a game plan to make things difficult for that Alabama quarterback, no matter who it is. If you're a UGA fan, that's certainly one of your best hopes there. Christopher Moore, good to have you here with us here. Lindsey Hardiman says that Ohio State's currently got the crystal ball prediction for Travion Henderson, but hopefully the Dogs can pull that out and get him. Yeah, Ohio State's been very busy on the recruiting trail. We've talked about that the last couple of days. And obviously Henderson has dropped his top 9 here as of late. That has kind of gone down where he has made Georgia one of his finalists. I'll invite you to check out the piece that Jeff Sintel wrote about Henderson at DawgNation.com, where he had some nice things to say about UGA. And this is something we've actually been talking about the last really few days, going back to when DawgNation Daily was still its regular format, regular show, normalcy all the way around. Back then, we were, kind of talking about the fact that for Georgia, running back was going to be an important position for 2021, but Ohio State had this huge need for running backs. Also, a lot of early momentum for the class and able to really sell in a legitimate sense some early playing time, because in the absence of J.K. Dobbins, there's not necessarily a great back waiting in the wings there. It's one of the reasons why they've been rumored to be in the mix for Trey Sermon, the transfer from Oklahoma, because there's just not a lot of depth at the running back spot right now. So from that standpoint, we already knew were going to be a factor for all the biggest running backs and for all of that. And from that standpoint, that's exactly the way that's playing out. But it certainly sounds like on the basis of Jeff's reporting and last week's edition Before the Hedges presented by Kroger was an example of this. It certainly seems like that Georgia remains in a pretty good spot for Henderson, who did include Georgia in one of his top 9 here as of late. Wayne Haynes says the Alabama defense hasn't looked the same since Kirby Smart left. I think that's true. I think in the immediate absence of Smart, replacing him with Jeremy Pruitt was a really good thing. Pruitt's a high-quality defensive coordinator. But once Pruitt took the Tennessee job, I think you've seen a little bit of a downward spiral for the Alabama offense, both in terms of the guy in the role of coordinator and the on-field results. Tosh Lapoy, I think, was unfairly scapegoated after the national championship loss in 2018. And replacing him with Pete Golding, go talk to an Alabama fan about Golding right now. Spend some time on an Alabama message board and see what they say about him. The same criticism you heard of Lapoy, you're hearing some similar kinds of things about Golding right now. Alabama fans are not happy with their current defensive situation. Crimson Tide last year, that was not a great defense. Now, Dylan Moses coming back healthy this year, they think that's going to be a bit of a difference maker. And for all we know, that's indeed going to be the case. But for now, Alabama and its reputation of great defense under head coach Nick Saban, for now, that reputation is on hold, at least for a little while here. So I think that's right. I think that one of the things that Alabama will be playing for when it plays Georgia in September is playing to regain that image that we used to have of them. Tough team, running the football, playing defense. That's not really what Alabama has been as of late. Tua Tagovailoa scoring 50 points a game, receivers going to the first round of the draft. There has been a lot of that, but a little less of the things that we used to think of with Nick Saban. It's one of the interesting, I think, kind of comparisons to Kirby Smart here too, where Smart is going to seemingly now, by hiring Todd Monken, by acknowledging that what was going on last year with James Coley wasn't working, not necessarily all of the blame laid at the feet of Coley, but Coley was the offensive coordinator, and the offense didn't work a season ago. So now Georgia's going to try to bring in some of what teams like Alabama and LSU have had, but while not losing what has made Georgia good, running the ball, playing defense. So Georgia's about to enter into a phase where they're going to try to grab some of the high-powered offense, some of the, as Monken has called it, throw-to-win mentality, and maybe a little less, without losing, I should say, some of the defense and some of the running game here. All right. Jennifer Caldwell Sperlin says she needs a shot of B12. Hope you get that energy taken care of. Miriam Martin Corbin, yeah, this is my home office here. We're doing DawgNation Daily from home here for the next couple of days. By the way, the beard's coming in. Give you a chance to see that. I have committed myself not to shaving during this very unusual time, and my wife's sort of okay with it. My kids are not too happy with it, so we'll see how much longer this little experiment lasts. Plus, some of y'all keep acting like I just rolled out of bed because I haven't shaved. This is all part of the master plan, but maybe we'll eventually have to go away with that if you guys don't like it. Robert Barnes, to go back to his comment a moment ago about the Georgia staff having a good plan in place. Yeah, I mean, for someone who's as meticulous as Smart, I would imagine that a scenario like this is both the best and worst of times, right? I don't mean to be funny. I'm being serious in a way. I would imagine that he's probably beside himself with like tension, maybe more so than he's ever been, and maybe more so than anybody else is, because when you are a little bit of, and I say this in a complimentary sense, when you're a little bit of a control freak, the absence of control can be a very difficult thing to deal with. And one way or another, Kirby Smart's not in control of what's happening here because no one is. This is a very unusual situation. So from that standpoint, I imagine Smart just climbing the walls, knowing that he can't assert his will on this scenario. But once things are a little bit more back to normal, someone like this, whose motor runs and whose ability to plan, I think is probably second to none. At that point in time, that's when I think you see the good stuff of Kirby Smart. He's not a casual person. And once the doors are open again to kind of start living life as normal, we know he's one of the guys who's going to hit the pedal to the metal and go 100 miles an hour, even faster than that, to get all this done. So I'm sure he is miserable right now, but no one will take more advantage of the time that you do have, and no one's going to be more, I would imagine, creative about figuring out a way to, kind of orchestrate some sort of plan right now that Smart probably is. Lindsay Hardiman on the subject of crystal ball predictions. I think it's going back to Henderson from a moment ago, Travion Henderson. Here's my theory on the crystal ball stuff. I think that over the course of the long haul, especially crystal balls that are done like way in advance, this is obviously a feature of 247sports.com. I'm more interested in like predictions, whether they be official predictions or just kind of online chatter. When it comes at a flurry all at once, especially late in the process, that's something like that I pay a little bit more attention to. Some of the early predictions that you see pop up online, I don't know how much those matter, nor do I know how much the person that predicted them intends for them to matter. But when a lot of stuff happens all at once, usually that's something that can't be ignored. Brad Hotnet asking about Eddie. Yes, Eddie is here. He needs to go up on the shelf behind. Yeah, maybe we can do that. Let's see if we can get him to stay up here. Can y'all see him good? There you go. Yeah, now everybody can see Eddie. We'll kind of position him like this. And so there you go on that. So good idea, Brad. We'll make Eddie able to be seen. Let me get a couple more from YouTube here for a moment. Andrew Hughes also making a pretty funny joke over here. Yeah, we love the idea of keeping the Gatorade stuff going, even in the midst of all of this. That's really funny, Andrew. Grun D says that any other coach like Dabo Swinney, Urban Meyer would have already won a national championship at Georgia with this talent that Georgia has. And so here's the one thing I'll say on that. Obviously, to go to Grun's point on the YouTube, obviously, at a certain point in time, Smart is going to be asked to make good on all the talent that he's collected and make good on the gigantic level of expectations that exist at Georgia. Obviously, at a certain point in time, that's what he's going to be asked to do. But I don't think that time is now. And I'm not saying that as a way of softening the blow if Georgia doesn't win a national championship in 2020. But it's important to note that all the coaches that you mentioned were far later into their coaching career when they won their first national championship than Kirby Smart is. Even the youngest of the coaches to win his first national championship, Dabo Swinney, still did so, and some of y'all will correct my numbers on this, wasn't it about 8 years into his career? Smart's only now going into year 5. So let's say that 2020 works out a little bit like the last couple of years have. It's going to stink in terms of the conversation we try to have on this show because at a certain point in time, you feel like you're talking about the same thing all the time. Best team in the SEC East, just not the best team in the SEC or the best team in the country. It feels like we've done a lot of that, over the last couple of years. And so to a certain extent, replaying that same conversation over and over again is not going to be all that enjoyable. But I'm telling you right now that if that's what occurs, if Georgia's the 4th best team in the country in 2020, 3rd best team in the country, if Georgia were to lose in the SEC championship again, as much as that's going to stink and as much as that's going to be just kind of sort of a tedious, repetitive conversation, Georgia back in the Sugar Bowl for the 3rd year in a row or something crazy like that. I'm telling you right now, I do not think that the championship window for Georgia is closed, nor do I think it's anywhere closer to being closed from where it has been. Georgia is still very much a championship contender, very much in the mix 2020 and beyond. That's not going away anytime soon. That's not changing anytime soon. I can promise you. I can promise you about that. I want to tell you about a friend here, or I want to tell you a little bit about my friends at Kroger just for a moment to give you an update on hours for them. So as of today, Kroger's going to be open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. for Kroger on that. Also, Fuel Center is going to be open from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. So that's the little bit of a new hour situation for Kroger. They're going to open a little later to make sure the store is nice and clean, make sure, fully sanitized the way that obviously you expect for it to be. That little bit later start makes it easier to do that. So 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. for our friends at Kroger. And I got to tell you this. I was at one of the Krogers in Alpharetta going back to Saturday. And I told you yesterday, I was talking to some of the folks there. I am so amazed at when things get really tough in our society, the people who really step up and serve. And an example of that is our friends at Kroger right now. And, the supermarket community has just been, as many of you have already been talking about in the video today, they have been met with is the word deluge? Is that the right way to say it? Deluge? Just a deluge of folks who, and it's not all panic buying, by the way. I know that we'll all kind of roll our eyes at the people were like hoarding toilet paper or hoarding hand sanitizer and things like that. By the way, PSA, soap and water is better for you than hand sanitizer is anyway. But nonetheless, it's not just the panic buying. Like for someone like me, we're eating every meal at home now, whereas, there'd be some restaurants and things like that. Now it's like every meal at home, we're legitimately buying more groceries than we typically would, just on the basis of being home a little bit more, on the basis of, so even beyond the panic buying, there are just more groceries being consumed right now, which puts a huge stress on our friends at Kroger. But to see with my own eyes the way in which they're responding, even people who've been working 13 and 14-hour days, seeing them still serve with a smile, take good care, answer questions, help people find the things they're looking for, really going a long way towards alleviating the anxiety that exists. When someone walks into a supermarket like Kroger right now, they're doing so with a measure of worry. Worry if they're going to find what they're looking for, and worry if they're making themselves potentially sick by interacting with other human beings. The folks at Kroger completely understand that, and I saw it with my own eyes. So Kroger's always been a great sponsor of ours and a great friend to us here at DawgNation Daily, and I can't thank them enough for the way in which they've responded to all of this. We're stocked up for now. I'm going to have to be back in a couple of days, and I know that when I walk in, I'll be one of the first ones to the door when I go through there. I know that I'm going to be taken well care of, and I appreciate that. Let me get a couple more here on YouTube here. Let's see what else is going on. Bama Boy over here stirring that with people. Yeah, we need these sports arguments right now to kind of get through some of this kind of stuff, for sure. By the way, Shelton Tucker mentioning, we don't talk NFL stuff on here necessarily, but y'all see Tom Brady, the Tampa Bay Bucks. What a wild thing that is. It's amazing, really, in the midst of what has been a really unusual time for almost every sport, total absence of sports for the most part. You turn on the NFL Network, they're just like business as usual. They're on there shouting about trades and free agent signings and things like that. Somehow, some way, the NFL always seems to find a way, and they appear to have found a way for us here on this right now. Tim Berkowitz on the subject of Alabama folks coming out here to talk trash. Yeah, I mean, listen, a good-natured argument's not necessarily a bad thing, right? And Bama Boy is usually pretty good about kind of keeping it in bounds. So we don't mind a little bit of that here and there. I get more of your comments coming up. Let me also kind of talk about what the podcast is going to be like today. And when we're done here, we will immediately start recording that there. I'll go down to my podcast studio, and if you think the video studio is nice, you should see the podcast studio here at stately BA Manor. So one of the things we're going to talk about is, I saw a really interesting tweet yesterday about Thomas Davis, who apparently could be on his way to the Washington Redskins. And one of the reasons why is a coach that knows him well, Ron Rivera, going back to his time as head coach of the Carolina Panthers, a place where Davis obviously spent a great number of years, wants to bring him in as a way of establishing a culture in Washington. That was a really interesting tweet. And I think what it tells us is that culture matters, right? And I think one of the cool things that UGA fans can kind of look to is the fact that this program now, and you'll give Kirby Smart credit for some of the contemporary names in this list, but you'll also give Mark Richt some of that credit as well. This UGA program has done a pretty good job of creating good football players who kind of also coincide with being good citizens. And Davis is an example of that, as still a current day player. Benjamin Watson's getting ready to retire. He was going to retire last year, decided to come back, and now he's getting ready to retire for real now. And he's certainly an example of that. For those of you that follow Watson on social media, you see lots of talk like that. I think in a day like this, when you can kind of pause and reflect for a moment, I think it's really cool to see the former Georgia players who are just good guys, right? Makes you proud. Admittedly, I got the Georgia G on my sweatshirt today. I got the SEC East champion T-shirt underneath that. Admittedly, for me, I'm going to cheer for Georgia probably no matter what. But cheering for Georgia, having known some good guys who've come through the program, it just makes it more fun, right? It makes it a little bit better to kind of wear that G, especially for those of you who are, alumni of the university. I think that's probably even more so. So we're talking about on the podcast a little bit today, and I'm going to give some credit for not just Kirby Smart's influence on that, but Mark Richt's as well, because, we're now seeing some of the additional fruit borne out for Richt's 15 years there, and guys like Davis and Watson are certainly examples of that. So that's part of the podcast. I did do a second interview with Jeff Sintel after having him yesterday. Today, we kind of got away from some of the recruiting stuff and got a little bit more into some of the on-field prognostications that have been out there. I was trying to have Mike Griffith on the show, and it just kind of turned into a little bit of a technical issue. We're still working through some of that kind of stuff. So hope to have Mike maybe on the show tomorrow, but it was day 2 for Jeff today. And the good news is, for the most part, the podcast is really not that different than the typical show that you're used to. The video part of this is a little weird, but the podcast part is really not any different at all. Dallas Schwartz, by the way, says that he's a South Carolina fan. He says, don't worry, we're going to soften up Alabama for you. Well, listen, I appreciate that. You'll take anything you can get in terms of softening up Alabama. And I think that South Carolina is one of the really interesting teams for this upcoming season. I think the presence of Mike Bobo is going to matter. And I think that Will Muschamp, if I'm looking for those SEC teams who I think have a chance to improve year over year, after just 4 wins a season ago, more than that for this upcoming season, I could definitely see that from South Carolina this upcoming year. Shane Elliott on the subject of our buddy Chuck Smith on some Falcons stuff. Yeah, boy, I wish we were still doing that Falcons talk right now. Can't wait to be doing that again really soon. Shane, appreciate you following us and all that. Robert Reynolds says, "Is Eddie playing the elf on the shelf?" Boy, I wish. You're talking about a gold mine. I wish I could have gotten in on. If we could turn Eddie into the college football version of the elf on the shelf, somebody that shows up around the start of the football season and plays mischief on the home. Gosh, imagine how many of those we could sell. That'd be pretty nice. Pretty nice. Lindsey Hardeman says, "Is that UGA drawing behind you, drawn by the guy who draws?" No. So what I have behind me is like a felt thing that my grandfather had, probably dating back to like the 60s or the 70s. And then he gave it to me. And then in the early 90s, I took that and got that autographed by, when I was a kid, like picture day at Georgia was really fun. And listen, this is nobody's fault. Georgia football is just more popular now than it used to be. Picture day now is kind of a logistical nightmare because so many people come and it's sort of hard to get anyone's autograph. But back in the 90s, when the program's footprint was a little bit smaller, the fan base is probably a little bit smaller. As a kid who loved Georgia football, I mean, you could just go talk to any player you want. So if let me see if I can grab this. Y'all pardon me. Let me see if I can do this without completely knocking everything down. So here's what all this has. So this is like early 90s stuff here. Let's see what we can see. There's Bernard Williams. Was it the Philadelphia Eagles he played for, I think? There's Greg Talley, Valdosta's own. There's Ray Goff, Larry Ware, George Wynn. You remember Joe Dupree, who had like a huge moment against Vanderbilt? I thought he was going to be like the next, I don't even know what, at quarterback. He's on here. There's Eric Zier. Nice signature from Zier. So this is Zier era. There's Andre Hastings. There's Vince Dooley. So I just went to picture day one day and got all these people to sign all this. And I'm sorry, you can't really see it on YouTube. Got all these people to sign this. Garrison Hurst on here somewhere. Preston Jones, Max Strong, who played for a long time in the NFL. So around my house, I have a lot of that kind of stuff. And the honest truth is, but around my house, I have a lot of those kind of old school autograph things from that era because that's around the time that I was a kid and was able to kind of get out there and do some of that kind of stuff. And honestly, the players back then, not that they're not now, they're still the same way. It's just hard to get access to them. Players back then, so nice. Lars Tate, when I was a little boy, very nice interaction with me. Zier and her necessarily, but always just really gracious. And so that was back in the time. I'm probably middle school in this era, I guess. Pre-high school, middle school type stuff. And they were really, really fun stuff. Really fun stuff. Keith Folds, going back to the topic of a championship window, it says it'll be open as long as Kirby Smart's our coach. And I agree with that. I mean, I think that championship window for Georgia is likely to extend for quite some time. And I think you just got to play the numbers. You just got to play the odds. You got to keep stacking that talent. Keep pushing those recruiting classes year over year. Keep putting yourself in a position to compete. And over the course of time, I think it's going to pay off for you in a really big way. Let's see what else is going on Facebook. Any more good comments on Facebook we'll get to? We're going to wrap up here in just a little bit. But we'll take a few more comments while we have some time. VTW on the subject of what may happen nationally. Oregon, he says, might end the Pac-12 drought. Mario Cristobal is building a powerhouse. I do think that Cristobal is doing a good job there at Oregon. And I think for as much as like Pac-12 football in general is really kind of falling on hard times. There's a lot of uncertainty about financial futures of the Pac-12, recruiting futures. Remember, teams like UCLA and USC are not recruiting very well at all. Cristobal, who spent some time around the SEC, certainly spent some time around the South, Sun Belt type area, he's kind of gone out there and instilled that attitude. And you look at, we think of Pac-12 football as being a little bit soft, to be completely honest with you. At least sometimes I probably do. But on the lines of scrimmage, very good offensive line, very good defensive line. Cristobal is really building the program the right way. So if you're looking for long-term threats to Georgia on the national level, I think for now you have to include Oregon as one of those teams. Oregon had a chance to prove itself last year by beating Auburn, not able to do that. But, there is still an idea that Oregon's going to be a big threat on the national stage here for a while. I want to say hello to my friends at Meriwether and Tharp. Of course, this is a time of year where some people were already dealing with a really very difficult situation in their life before even some of the other stuff went on. Obviously, Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. You don't want to go through a divorce. Totally understand that. But if you find yourself facing that situation, you got to have an advocate on your side. Meriwether and Tharp can be that for you. You can find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. It'll get you in touch with Meriwether and Tharp. And we have a nice graphic on the screen. Don't have that. We'll have a homemade graphic for them, but probably coming up pretty soon. But theatlantadivorceteam.com. That'll get you in touch with Meriwether and Tharp. And what I'm noticing here is the way I have the light position today, I'm a lot brighter on YouTube than I am on Facebook. I apologize for the Facebook side for being a little dark on this. I moved the cameras closer together that blocked the light, and moved the light. Now the light's not quite hitting me as well as it could over here. So we're still figuring out all of this, and we'll keep working on that and try to get all that done. A few more minutes with all of you right now. Bill Halsey brings up a good point. I didn't see this, but it's interesting that Philip Fulmer said, when you're not able to go to the weight room, he said, well, Herschel Walker did basic push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups. He was one of the greatest athletes ever. It really is true. And I had a chance to spend some time with Herschel back in July. It's amazing the physical condition that he still finds himself in. And the legend goes, and this is something I've sort of been passed down to me by the generations, but that he was a push-up guy. He was a sit-up guy, not, the great weight training kind of stuff that we see right now. That's a little bit more of kind of what he was known for. And I never thought I'd say this on the show, but in this case, I agree with Philip Fulmer that if Herschel could do it old school back in the day, then pretty much anybody now can still stay in really good shape. That's actually a good point. I didn't see that. Memphis Dog says, Blind Eddie says he's having trouble seeing you. Yeah, I guess maybe him and everybody else too. Eric Devorncy says, let's take a tour of your home. Y'all remember that old MTV Cribs show? Maybe we'll do a MTV Cribs version of BA's house. I don't think you'd be too impressed. A very modest dwelling, but listen, maybe so. We'll do that eventually. By the way, let's go ahead and get ready to roll into our R.S. Andrews cool down. I do have the homemade graphic ready to go for R.S. Andrews. My kids were nice enough to make this. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can find them online at rsandrews.com. They'll take good care of you and get you ready. My kids did a nice job of getting that made up here. So we'll take a few more of your comments. Then after that, I got to get rolling and got to get ready to do the podcast. And I did post the show to Facebook yesterday, available on all the podcast platforms. Make sure you need to check all that out. Roger Badgley Jr., thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. He says, we need UGA football news on a daily basis during these odd days. And that's what we're going to try to do. We're going to try to provide some fun, some enjoyment. We'll try to joke around. We'll debate. Y'all can yell at me for my ludicrous hot takes. Whatever it takes to keep you entertained during this time, we're going to try to do that. Matt Rugavina says he watched the Hobnail Boot game the other night. That was so much fun. Truly a turning point. Yeah, that's obviously one of the great memories, and watching that on TV, I think or YouTube, I guess it would be right now, kind of brings all that back to mind again. It's a really fun thing to do. I think one of the things I'm going to do is also try to collect some of the odd videos that maybe on YouTube and try to present those at some point in time of some of the things that maybe you haven't seen quite as much of, but to go back and relive the Hobnail Boot. I was lucky enough to be in Knoxville there that day as a fan, sitting in the stands. I really enjoyed that. Lucky enough to be able to do that. And it's one of the great memories. And taking this time to relive some of that kind of stuff is really, really good. And we've obviously talked over the years to guys like David Green and Veron Haynes and the moment they've had. But our buddy Randy McMichael also had a really good game there that day. On that game-winning drive, McMichael, who we've had on the show a ton, he's as instrumental, I think, as what Haynes was, as what Green was. McMichael comes up with some really big catches. And so, that's really fun. That's really fun. Let's see a couple more things here. Tim Berklich, I think, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. Memphis Dog says I may be breaking some child labor laws with our graphics department for our R.S. Andrews cool down and things like that. Listen, the kids want to be on the show right now. I'm having to keep them at bay, almost like a lion tamer, because they want to get out here and start producing their own content. So they may be doomed to a life of trying to do things like this themselves. We'll have to see about that. New Jack says, BA, tip your hat. Not a chance in the world. Not a chance in the world am I taking my hat off right now. I've got the world's worst hat head. Y'all have already shamed me for my appearance. So, New Jack, there is not a chance in the world this hat's coming off, at least not right now. At least not right now. Mary Martin Corbin says, that game was a real classic, and it was Munson at his finest. It really is. For those of you who are golf fans, the Hobnail Boot game for me is Nicklaus 86 Masters. For those of you that don't realize, the 86 Masters for Nicklaus was kind of well after his prime. It's this great moment, one of the most historic golf moments of all time. And it came at a time in which Nicklaus was really kind of not in the prime of his career anymore. And I would say that for Munson, it's kind of the same way, in that most of the great moments for Munson had happened years prior to that. And some of this had to do with the fact that Georgia didn't have a huge collection of wins, maybe necessarily leading up to the Hobnail Boot game. But for a guy like Munson to arguably have had his best moment, and there are going to be people who tell you that the Hobnail Boot call, the way that it goes down, is as good as Run Lindsay or some of the other things that came out there. To have a moment like that late into your career is really pretty amazing. And I mean, I've talked to Veron Haynes about this. I've talked to David Green about this, that there's something really special that happens for you when you are connected to a Larry Munson call. And unfortunately, a counterexample to that is the Michael Johnson touchdown against Auburn in 2002. Great moment. And I'd give anything to go back to hear Larry call that entire game. But the call of the Johnson touchdown was probably not quite as punchy as the Hobnail Boot, call became. And so therefore the Johnson touchdown, which is amazing play, a touchdown on 4th and forever at Jordan-Hare Stadium to win the SEC East for the first time. Georgia not won the SEC East, won it for the first time on a prayer throw by David Green on 4th down at Jordan-Hare Stadium, a building that had been a house of horrors for Georgia over the years. And yet it kind of gets lost to time in comparison to the Hobnail Boot, because in some ways the Munson call didn't quite have that same catchphrase attached to it. So, one of the things that makes Hobnail Boot so remembered is because of how great the Larry Munson call was on that. VTW, the modern version of that's Chris Fowler on the Sonny Michel touchdown. I know a lot of you are going back to rewatch that Rose Bowl, and there's probably no better, more entertaining game to rewatch. One of the great Georgia games of all time, one of the great Rose Bowls of all time, one of the great college football game, college football playoff games, right? I mean, how many playoff games? Probably a couple of the Alabama Clemson's could be in the running for this, but how many playoff games over the course of the last 5 years have been better than what that Georgia-Oklahoma game was? So that one will get rewatched by a lot of folks there as well. Brad Hodnett says, I got to start shaving some of this bottom neck hair. Yeah, eventually we may have to get there. I'm letting it grow in a little bit more, then I'll start kind of cleaning it up a little bit. Maybe we'll get that done by tomorrow. Mitch Marchman says that he named his first son Knox after Knox Culpepper. That's really cool. That's really good to know. A great one to name your son after for sure. Dallas Schwartz, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. I really appreciate that. What other games are the ones y'all are rewatching? And after this, we got to get ready to go. Hobnail Boot's a good one. I'd love to find Georgia Auburn in 2002. I'd like to rewatch that game. Georgia got down 14-0 early, came back. Wonder how easily that game can be found. I'd be curious to hear what all you guys are rewatching right now. So let me get ready to wrap up for now. Thanks for being patient with a little bit of a different thing for us. By the way, Gerald Harmon went to Marietta High School with Eric Zier. How about that? Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like, Marietta's a power again now, and obviously that kind of, calls back to the very early 90s. Zier's senior season at Marietta was 1990. Is that right? Freshman at Georgia 91, senior at Marietta 90. Am I right about that, Gerald? Yeah, it kind of brings to mind back in those days. All right, we're gonna get ready to go here. All right, we may have to block somebody on YouTube. It looks like we'll take care. Water heater goes out. You want to get that taken care of right now? Our friends at RS Andrews can provide that. rsandrews.com. It's rsandrews.com. They will take good care of you. Huge thanks to my kids for making the graphic for us on that. Also, getting ready for air conditioning season. It's about to be 80 degrees. It was warm yesterday. I think it's going to be even warmer later on this week. So make sure you check them out on all of that too. They will take good care of you. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles, and they'll continue to deliver those smiles even during this time when they're, at least in some respects, may not feel like an awful lot to smile about. So we really appreciate RS Andrews. Also, don't forget, if you go to DawgNation.com, at the top of the page, there's a link to the AJC e-paper. You want to find out about how the coronavirus is impacting your world, your city if you live in Atlanta, your state if you live in Georgia. AJC doing unparalleled coverage of that, and it's right now available to you totally for free. Go to the link, DawgNation.com, to get to the daily AJC e-paper, and you can take care of that. Y'all have a good day. I'll see you back here again tomorrow for another episode of DawgNation Daily. Check out the podcast. It'll be up here, coming up pretty soon as well. Talk to you tomorrow.